Hey everyone, welcome back to another session of In the Studio with Brad, where for the next 2 hours or so, I will be doing some artwork this week for the upcoming Dying Earth role-playing game. Hope you guys are having a good Monday. Hope you're remembering that this is Martin Luther King Day, and we should all be thinking about what he meant to the world. But in the meantime, that's enough politics. So I was originally had another picture that was scheduled for me to work on, but I think it needs a little bit of a resketch before I take it to finals. And I had worked this sketch up as a spec piece for Dying Earth, and since Matt approved it, I'm going to be working on it. So what have I been working on in the past week? Truth to tell, not quite as much as I would personally like. It turns out that I have been sick the past week. I think it was a bad reaction to some medicine that I was taking, but we have changed that. So I'm feeling much better, much more productive. So here is the final of the piece that I was working on last Monday. And somebody pointed out that this was supposed to be a picture. I had said that this was inspired by the character Kudril the Clever from the second Dying Earth novel. Somebody pointed out that his hat is all wrong because it's not nearly ridiculous enough. That's why when I reported like inspired by, because I don't know how I'm supposed to draw a hat that is indescribable. So there you go. This is the sketch that I will be working on probably tomorrow or Wednesday. This is actually taken directly from one of the second to last story in the first Dying Earth novel. And it's like Ulan Dhor Kills a Dream, something like that. So this will be done by this time next week. So I will show it off then. Now, got some color stuff for you. And this is for Dungeon Denizens. Okay, so first off, we have a swarm of killer pebbles. Now, to make it understandable, obviously I had to draw them a little bit larger than a bunch of pebbles, but you get the basic idea. So that is one. This picture, excuse me, I better take a sip of water here because I seem to be losing my voice. Is some sort of like major flame elemental, in case you couldn't guess from the fact that he's all reds and oranges and yellows and whites. And this is the other piece that I am working on. It is still a work in progress. It's a water elemental, as if you couldn't guess from the I think I just have to turn it like this, because I don't think I can get to that. So I will probably be working on this after I get the end of the show tonight. So, and one last piece. Actually, I'm not going to bother showing it to you because I don't think it's been officially announced yet. So you're just going to have to wait, guys. Sorry. In the meantime, I have my handy dandy bucket full of bad jokes and weird facts. So if anybody wants to dip into those, just checked earlier and there are no AMAs, but if anybody cares to pipe up and throw them at me, I will be glad to answer them.
We already have a random joke or random fact redeemed thanks to Joan of Arc.
Okay, Joan of Arc. In honor of the start of the new new school year, well, halfway new school year, however you want to phrase it. What school subject is the fruitiest? Are you ready?
Ready as I'll
I'll wait
ever
about
be.
I'll wait another few seconds so that the people who value their sanity have time to run away. Because history, because it's full of dates. I think I'm going to get a small matchbook or a small flamethrower for jokes like that. So, don't say I didn't warn you, Joan. In the meantime, I am going to retreat into the world of the dying earth and get some drawing done and try not to just hang my head and cry at some of these jokes. This picture was literally done the other night because I was painting and it's like, okay, I got to let the ink or the paint set for a while. But I felt like still trying to do something productive. So I just grabbed a fairly small sheet of illustration board, which was left over from another job. I have like boxes of this stuff. And just kind of did a picture of a random wizard from the Dying Earth setting. No one in particular this time.
So I do have two questions. One of them I'll go ahead and answer. Hippie Grenade, I do not believe was able to make it to last week's show. He asked you if you're hireable in the near future. The answer is not for freelance work.
No, sorry. When I signed on with Goodman, it was an exclusive deal. I was under the same, it's kind of the same deal as when I was at Game Designers Workshop back in the 90s. This is what my paycheck is these days. So no freelance for the foreseeable future. And you said you had another question?
Yes, so the other question is from Sky2, and they ask the Dying Earth fauna is famously vague in description. What has that meant as far as illustration process?
Fauna? Truth to tell, I haven't really had to tackle any of it yet. But you're right, yeah. Some of their stuff is very vague, or like, how do you draw a what's even on the first page, like a plant butterfly hybrid? I'm like, okay, this is going to be fun to try and figure out how. But that's one of the fun things about the exoticism of the setting, that it is set so far in the future that things like, butterfly plant hybrids exist. That is very much a bridge I will cross when it comes to it. And I'll probably also be reaching out to Errol Otis because he is the Dying Earth god, and saying like, hey, do you have any ideas what some of this stuff would look like? One thing that is actually important, and this is not just related to Dying Earth, when you're working on a project and there's several different artists working on it, it's a good idea to have kind of an artist's Bible, and that's sometimes nothing more complicated than one person who kind of sets the tone. A few months ago, I was doing some artwork for Curse of the Devil Lich, and I reached out to Doug Kovacs, who was the kind of the head artist, because he ended up doing the cover and a fair amount of the interior stuff. And it's like, Doug, I need to know what the character of the Devil Lich actually looks like. And soon enough, in my email, I had a couple different pictures of his version of the Devil Lich for me to work on. So sorry. It's really important with some games to have some sort of a person in charge of the Bible of the artwork. For example, I used to do work for BattleTech, which is very specific. So I had to make sure that all the different mechs looked like the mechs from the books that were already published. And I remember the first time I did a job for them, and the art director asked me if I had much in the way of BattleTech, and I'm like, no, not really. So about 3 days later, this literally gigantic box shows up from FASA, and it's like 10 different source books for me to reference while I was doing the job. Hold on just a second, guys. Got to break out the handy dandy circle template here. There we go. Now, these days, I imagine if you were doing a job like that, they'd just send you a ton of PDFs. But I know that first time is like, oh my God. I didn't even know that much about BattleTech until this, but I was pretty much an expert by the time I was done with that job. Sorry. Here we go. Get some nice texturing on this staff real fast. So, any other questions or comments from the audience here?
Not currently. Zombie Folly is talking about how they really, really need to see some of your mechs because they love BattleTech.
Unfortunately, all that artwork is buried deep in my files, and actually I've never bothered to get the books out of storage since I do not do work with the BattleTech company anymore. I only have X amount of room to display stuff, and as much work as I have done for Goodman Games, basically it has kind of eaten up a fair amount of my otherwise normal displayment areas. But I did used to love me some BattleTech. It scratches a kind of a sci-fi itch that I just occasionally have to work out through. And what do you expect? Come on, guys. I used to work at GDW where I was doing spaceships every day for over a year. You know what? I'm going to add one more floating here. I figure as long as I've got the circle template here, I might as well just do all the stuff that is very, very circular. Okay, that is that for the moment. Now back to drawing this really, really weird staff this wizard is holding. Okay, there we go.
So we all know that your favorite things are zombies, right?
Okay.
So as far as like mystical, like fantasy made up creature, other than I mean, I guess zombies are kind of made up. Um, what are
I
your
hope so.
favorite favorite mystical magical creatures that you like to do?
Well, I have a fondness for drawing vampires because, well, everybody likes drawing vampires and they're easy to do. I don't know. That's a kind of a good question. Dragons, I know, can be kind of a pain to draw because you've got to go in and do all the scales and the details. I would say probably like creatures from the Cthulhu mythos. I love drawing things like Byaki and night gaunts and such, if that answers your question at all. I also have a fondness for drawing characters inspired by Clive Barker's Hellraiser franchise. Gotcha. Now, one thing I know I do not particularly like drawing, unless the job requires it, is things like birds and such, because once you start having to draw the feathers, it can take forever to make any sort of progress on the picture. I'm enough of a detail freak that I can't just go, and be happy. Sorry. That's not the way I'm going to draw a bird's wings. I'm going to have to detail every feather and all the quills on the feather, or I'm just not going to be happy with the product. Okay, where am I? Hold on. Give me just a second, guys. I got to clean off some stuff from my desk here so I don't ruin anything.
While you're cleaning up, I'll leave this little tidbit from Matt, saying that
Okay.
speaking of fantasy creatures, he'd like to see your take on an aboleth.
I'll see if I can find the artwork, because I actually was working on a picture of an aboleth for many, many years ago for a company called Zeitgeist Games, which Joseph actually did publish for something like, it was actually one of the Greyhawk books that Dave Arneson had written. I'll have to see if I can find a copy for next week. Okay. Let's see here. But I don't think you're going to be seeing me doing any obeleths for Dungeon Crawl Classics. I think that is one of the monsters that is kind of proscribed in the OGL. That, along with things like Beholders and Mind Flayers.
Funny that you say that, because his reply was that it sounds awesome, and maybe for a future ore book or an FEF adventure.
And do not know, couldn't tell you until I get the work order. Okay, hold on just a second, guys. I'm still feeling a little bit muzzy from, even though I'm not on those meds anymore. So it's still taking me a little bit of time to get my brain in full gear today, this week. Just a second, guys. Sorry, I was just thinking real fast. As I think I've said before, a not insignificant amount of the art process is trying to figure out what you're doing even then when you're working from a fairly tight sketch. For example, I did not include the shading on her belt here in the sketch, but now it's kind of necessary. There you go. There we go.
So, Joan asks, have you ever done artwork that's not quote unquote prescribed by a publisher, but then turned it in?
Do you mean that one where I just kind of like did some artwork and turned it in? There was a company several years ago that literally just told me to draw a bunch of quarter pagers and they would take whatever I want. It did not end very well because the company put out one product and went out of business, leaving a whole lot of freelancers high and dry, which is not cool to me at all. If nothing else, simply because, it's, if I'm going to do artwork, I expect to be paid for it, unless I know that I'm just doing it just for fun. And obviously the artwork that I'm doing just for fun, I'm not expecting to get paid for, nor am I expecting it necessarily to be published. I generally only work if I know that I have a chance of monetizing it. This was actually kind of an unusual case, this piece, but I also knew that Matt was going to need a lot of artwork. So it's like, you know what, I will just go ahead and do this. And it only took me like half an hour to do the sketch. It took almost as long to get my scanner to behave itself. But no, I very rarely just do spec pieces and expect that somebody's going to buy it. There we go. Now draw her heels. It's probably not very realistic that she has wearing any sort of heels, but it does make the picture more visually interesting. So there we go. Do a little bit of stipple here for the skin tones. One thing that I have had to remember to my chagrin is when I do stippling like this, I have to give the ink plenty of time to finish air drying, because what will happen is, because I'm laying down a drink like that, more ink gets deposited than if I'm actually just drawing of the line. And if I'm not careful and I try to erase too fast, the ink will very cheerfully smear. Now, usually not so bad that it ruins well, it hasn't happened so bad that it has ruined the picture, but there's been a couple of times where it's like, oh, that's going to take a while to fix in Photoshop. Yay. You know. One of the things I'm still having to make myself remember sometimes is, when you're a commercial artist, you still have to take your time sometimes. You very much can get into the mindset of finish this picture, get it out the door, get on to the next illustration, but sometimes you screw up. That's just something you got to learn. Okay, now. Do this little bit here. I think I need to revise how I'm doing some of this shading here. Trying to make her boots look nice and glossy and well polished. Like I said, some of these things, these decisions, you kind of you make them on the fly as you're doing the final artwork. There we go. Mm. I think this is a good example of thoroughly impractical clothing. Now, every once in a while, they will describe the characters in the Dying Earth as wearing fairly practical clothing, but they're usually not the wizardly types. Another reason I decided to make this character like this is, for better or worse, most of the female characters in the Dying Earth series kind of fall under the category of being the damsel in distress. There are very few, or well, they're not always necessarily damsel in distress, but they're almost always somehow related just to, like, oh, I'm doing this because this wizard that either created me literally, wants me to do it, or I love this wizard that created me. So I wanted to try and do at least one female character that doesn't look like she's waiting to be rescued. There we go. A little bit lighter on the shading in the background here. one thing you really have to be careful of and conscious of when you're doing artwork like this, especially if it's for reproduction. This is going to be reproduced about only 80% of the original, the size that I'm drawing at. And how that can become relevant is if you do your line work too fine, it can actually drop off or drop out during the printing process. So if you notice, I tend to draw my line work just a little bit more vigorously. That way I know that it will hold when when it is printed. It would probably be faster if I did everything at 100%, but I find that doing that, you sometimes end up, well, one thing, if you make any mistakes, it's there to show. Whereas if you are doing it slightly larger, some mistakes that you might have made without realizing it will get lost. So it's kind of a two-edged sword. Speaking of swords, I think I'm going to go ahead and ink this blade a little bit.
Well, when you get to a stopping point, Jess has redeemed another random Joker fact.
Okay, give me just a second. Let me finish this little bit on the blade here. There we go. Okay. Random joke or fact. There we go. I do not know whether this is a joke or a fact. So here's one I did not know. I'm sure you're all familiar with the painting American Gothic, whether you know the painting or the umpteen zillion parodies of it. But the old woman and the guy with the pitchfork, and they've got the building and the farmhouse in the background. That's not actually a husband and wife. That's actually a father and daughter. I honestly did not know that. So there you go. That's your art history lesson for the day. That is also probably one of the most parodied pieces of artwork in the history of artwork. Oops. Oh, I need to fix that in Photoshop. I kind of overextended the hilt of the blade. Not a big deal, easily fixed. Here we go. I'm going to do some cross hatching here. There we go. That looks better.
Uh-oh, it's that time again. Zombie Folly has now redeemed 1,000 points for a random Joker fact.
Okay. Just remember, Zombie Folly, I know where you live. And this looks like it's going to be a joke. So brace yourselves, folks. What did the stamp say to the envelope on Valentine's Day? Answer: I'm stuck on you.
Okay, that one made me want to vomit.
Yeah. Excuse me just a moment, folks. Okay. Oh, come on. Hold on just a second, guys. There we go. Now, where were we? After I'm... For season three, I will be finding my own jokes, by the way, folks. Just so you have something to look forward to. Since I realize these jokes are probably... I'm pretty sure the guys at Chaosium are following some of these jokes as examples of how to destroy your sanity. If they're not, they should be. Okay. There we go. There was a time I did not like to do any sort of stipple work, but I find for small pieces like this, it does help to really distinguish skin tones from other textures in the image. So I don't mind taking the few extra minutes that it takes to do a good bit of stipple. what I will quite likely do is, if I do get this done tonight, I will literally let it sit overnight just to make sure that all these tiny little dots of ink have had time to dry. Hold on. My wife made me some iced tea earlier this evening. And it's very good. I'm kind of contractually required to love my wife's iced tea anyhow, because otherwise she has spare pillows, if you know what I mean. But I think she really does make killer iced tea, and I can literally drink it by the gallon, especially in the summertime. There was one time she made like this gallon of iced tea in the afternoon, and by bedtime it was gone. I used to joke that I have very, very simple tastes. Give me some iced tea and some pizza and some popcorn, and I could basically live on that. Okay, so we are coming up on the 1 hour mark for this show. And let's see if I can get this entire thing done by 10 o'clock. What do you think, folks? Think I can do it? Oh, and while I am blathering like this, do not forget that we are doing a drawing at the end of the season. And one of you will be, or rather 3 of you, will be getting some original artwork to show off. You just gotta enter the drawing, which, dear, put it in the chat room. Thank you. There we go.
Okay, this is a really random question, but it just popped in my head, so I'm going to ask. Is there
Okay.
any hairstyle, like updo, downdo, whatever, that you absolutely hate trying to draw?
Absolutely hate trying to draw. Wow. I haven't tried to do it, but I'm pretty sure I would hate having to draw something like a French braid because it is so elaborate. I do characters with dreadlocks fairly often, especially in my more sci-fi oriented artwork or modern urban fantasy style artwork. And anyone who knows my artwork knows that I do love to do a nice long head of hair. I haven't even started on the head of hair on this wizard yet, but I will be shortly. Sorry. I have found that drawing straight hair is actually a lot harder than it looks to make it look good. Okay.
Sky 2 says that they feel like they've seen an impressive mullet or two in your gallery, mainly on your loinclothed warrior types.
Oh, yeah. Well, come on. Especially when it's the DCC stuff. And we are talking the height of fashion of 1978 here. There we go. Happily, it does not necessarily work out that, you know, the hairstyles that were very popular when you were growing up suddenly becomes your default style, because otherwise all my characters would look like they had perms. Oh, there we go. Excuse me, folks. There we go. Do a couple lines here to suggest the wrinkles in her boots. There we go. Okay. Give me just a minute, folks. I want to do some quick outlining here so I know where I'm heading next with some of the details in this drawing. Okay, I gotta take a break. So tell you what, folks, let's do a bonus. I think this is going to be a random fact, but we'll find out in a moment. I feel like I should do a disclaimer before I tell some of these jokes, because what did one piece of toast say to the other? You're my butter half. You know, if there were a international committee against bad jokes, I have a feeling I would be criminal number one. Sorry about that, folks. Let's see here. Let's do some background work here. Get the rest of this plane drawn while I'm thinking about it. So in case any of you were wondering, and this is just to kind of fill up some of the airtime here. When I'm in the studio, usually by myself here, I usually have YouTube playing and I'm listening to either a folklore, kind of one of their pseudo podcasts there, or I'm listening to all sorts of weird music. I like to joke that I probably have the weirdest collection of soundtracks in Northwest Ohio, possibly in all of Ohio, except for, at some universities, of course. So it is not unusual for me to be listening to the soundtrack from, like, say, the original Godzilla movie, or any number of obscure Italian horror movies, which seem to really be fond of really upbeat jazz music, which never ceases to confuse me because, you've got this horrible scene of somebody being chased down and killed by maybe a guy in an owl mask, and it's got this do 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 do. It's pretty bizarre. It's like, do you guys even know what you're composing music for when you take on some of these jobs? I don't think so. Case in point, if you ever want to double check what I'm talking about, go to YouTube and do a search for a movie called Tentacles. It was a shameless Jaws ripoff, obviously, because it came out like 1979. And of course, it is about a killer octopus, which of course is like wildly oversized because, nobody's going to get too terribly scared by the idea of a killer octopus that's only, like 3 inches across. But the music for it is just this really cheerful, upbeat electronic jazz. And I'm like, what on earth? It's completely baffling to me. But hey, if that's what the audiences wanted at the time, hey, who am I to say? Okay, here's a fun little piece of equipment for you. Some of you may have heard of French curves, and you've maybe even seen me use one. This is kind of your classic French curve. But every once in a while, you have a curve that you're trying to do, and you just don't have the tool right on hand to do it. So what this is, it is literally a flexible ruler, and you can shape it however you need to, just like so. Okay, there we go. I got this from the local Michael's store, and it has been invaluable ever since. Now, back to what we were working on here. Sorry about that, folks, if I was sliding out of frame. There we go. My art supplies seem to be revolting against me tonight. Here we go. This might be something. Anybody got any trivia questions for me? Let's see if we can stump the artist.
I'll let you know if any pop in.
Okay. Don't mind me if I'm humming to myself a little bit, folks. That's vastly preferable to me actually starting to sing. I'm not saying that I have a horrible singing voice, but last time I sang in public, I got a letter from Stephen King's therapist with a cease and desist letter. And, so, just one of those things. Also got a thank you letter from Clive Barker, so I guess it balances out. Actually, speaking of Stephen King, here's an actual thing that happened. Yay, many, many, many years ago, I was a huge Stephen King fan. Not so much anymore, but, I was a teenager at the time. And this was right after Pet Sematary had come out. So I, being a fanboy, wrote a fan letter to Mr. King. And I included some Xeroxes of some artwork I had done. I was a big Bernie Wrightson fan, so you can kind of imagine. And plus, this is artwork I'm sending to Stephen King, for God's sakes. I don't think he'd be terribly interested if I sent him a picture of a bunch of puppy dogs or flowers. So, several months later, I get a postcard in the mail from P.O. Box 186, Bangor, Maine. And it basically read, Dear Bradley, let me see if I can remember it in as close as I can, because this was only a postcard. Like, thank you for your letter, but if I actually personally responded to every letter I get, I'd never have the time to actually write the books that you love, but appreciated Stephen King. So that was obviously printed, kind of like, like he had sent out and got like a 1,000 of those, and they just kind of like add in the name and throw it back in the mail. But this is what made my day, made my month, made my year. P.S. I'm glad you liked Pet Sematary, and that's some really great artwork. Which means that this letter had been passed his secretary, I assume he had a secretary by that time, had got my letter, looked at it, and kind of flagged it to send on to Uncle Stevie. Need to say, that was pretty much the highlight of that entire year. I still somewhere in storage have that postcard, because you don't get nobody gets letters like that very often.
So, one question that I do have for you, what was the
Okay.
first piece that you ever did for Goodman Games, if you remember?
That would have been, I don't remember the exact picture, but that would have been for dinosaurs that never were, for the sadly now defunct Bronchosaurus Rex game line. As the name suggests, it was a book of fantasy or sci-fi dinosaurs. And no, I do not remember what the first piece I did was, but obviously Joseph was happy enough about it with it to give me more work. Interesting little detail. That book also, if I remember correctly, had artwork by a guy named Tom Yates, and another artwork also by a guy named Paul Brogard, I believe. Some of you may be familiar with Paul Brogard's artwork from an obscure movie called Jurassic Park. And some of you may be familiar with Tom Yates's work because he is currently the artist for the Prince Valiant Sunday newspaper. So I like to think that I was hanging out with some fairly impressive artists at that time. Hold on just a second, guys. We got to do a little bit of, whoops, that ain't gonna work. There we go. I mean, it kind of reminds me of, there was an old game called Skyrims of Jarun, which was a critical favorite, but never really went anywhere in terms of actual sales. And the artist that did it, and I met him at Gen Con 1989, if that gives you an idea how long ago this was. When, his company was set up right across from the company I was with at the time. So we had time to occasionally socialize and chat, and at the TSR party that Saturday night, we chatted some more, and then he kind of vanished from the gaming industry. And I found out years later that he had pulled up roots and gone out to California to get to work in to try to work in the movie industry. And his very first job, you will all be familiar with because he was the guy that designed the devil that was Tim Curry's character in the movie Legend. Yeah. He has also worked on Pirates of the Caribbean, and I'm not sure what he's working on these days, but you get the idea. So, I mean, it's literally one of those, my God, I knew this guy blank when. It was really strange. The one night I was watching, like, I think it was one of the Halloween competition shows on Food Network. And there he was, special effects artist Miles Tevis. And I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like, hon, I know that guy, or at least knew him. And obviously it's been many years since I've talked to him. Okay. Sorry. My brain decided to take a micro vacation there, it would seem. Sorry about that, folks. Yes, I do have a huge pile of pens here. Different nibs serve different purposes. Okay. Hold on just a second, folks. go. Any other questions, trivia, anything? Did everybody fall asleep on me?
No, I myself am not falling asleep, thank goodness. But
Okay, well that's good.
I'm also fascinated by shading. I don't know, like shading is just so impressive to me.
Okay, now.
Folly is also in agreement with me. Nope, we're here, just watching him shade in ink.
Okay. Just want to make sure, folks. One thing I have discovered is after a certain point, a lot of this is so natural to me. That's how I can just kind of like carry on a conversation, or at least some sort of conversation, while still drawing like this. Come on, I don't want to use this pen. I'm saving it for a rainy day. Sorry, I have a pen here that is, and that's another one I want to save for a rainy day. I need a pen that I can just use. There we go. Now, if you notice, when I'm actually painting or I'm doing something like the cross scratch board, if you notice, I tend to get a lot more quiet because it does require a lot more concentration on my part, which is not a bad thing. You know, you need to keep trying to learn new techniques. You want to keep the techniques that you've got going, because that becomes, to a certain degree, the focus of your style. After all, you don't want to become known as, say, a detail person and then not do a detail work in a piece, where you're probably going to have some very unhappy clients, and unhappy clients tend to become ex-clients. So you have to kind of learn how to strike this balance of remembering to try to learn new things all the time, but at the same time, keep doing the stuff that is why you've gotten the jobs in the first place. There are a few artists out there that seem to have built names and reputations for themselves based literally on their willingness to explore, like Bill Sinkovich, but I'm not exactly in Bill Sinkovich's league. So I will stick to just slowly expanding my repertoire while still keeping what I'm doing and just working on improving that too. Speaking of which, my wonderful wife surprised me last week with a whole new medium. We had talked about a medium called gouache. It's kind of like a thick watercolor. So she ended up buying me some off Amazon, and I haven't had a whole lot of time to experiment with it yet because, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I've been feeling pretty crappy. But I'm really looking forward to a chance to try some with the gouache. Hopefully by the end of the season, you'll be able to see me do some gouache. And yes, Joan, I know I promised you some scratchboard work, but I am still trying to get caught up on some of my other stuff.
So we have another random factor joke.
Okay.
Thank you, Jess.
What's that?
I said thank you, Jess.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Jess. And now the rest of the audience, you know who to blame this for. Oh, here we go. Here's one that I have heard. The teddy bear is named after President Theodore Roosevelt. After he refused to shoot a captured black bear on a hunt, a stuffed animal maker decided to create a bear and name it after the president. So yes, I'd heard that story before. Interestingly enough, I actually had a teacher in high school, and junior high and high school actually, that modeled himself after Theodore Roosevelt, all the way down to the same style of mustache and wearing the same kind of little glasses. Oddly enough, he hated being called teddy bear. But I'm thinking, you know, like, if you're gonna emulate Theodore Roosevelt, and like I said, to the point where he wore the same kind style of glasses, I don't complain if you know, your students buy into the whole process. I guess, and I heard this after I graduated, he actually started doing readings dressed as Theodore Roosevelt. So I don't know. Maybe that time he had reconciled himself to his fate. I do not know. Oh, looks like we only got about 20 more minutes, folks. So I don't think I'm going to get this done before the end of the show. But I'd say we've made some pretty good progress. There we go. Hold on. There we go. So I should have this done well before next week, and I will show it off then. Not sure what I'm going to be working on for next week. I will have to let you know. I know I've got Dungeon Denizens to work on. There we go. Trying to figure out where I want to finalize this piece. Thicken these lines a little bit so that she pops from the background just that little bit. And you don't have to do a complete boom around everything, just enough to make her stand out a little bit. There we go. And I just realized I've been kind of avoiding doing her head. Oops. Let's work on her head for the last few minutes here, folks. In case you folks are kind of wondering why I suddenly switched pens, the type of ink in this pen, the Winsor Newton, tends to dry very fast and very opaque, so I don't have to worry about it smearing as much when I go to erase the construction lines. I mean, I'll still have to wait, but I won't have to wait as long.
Grape Ape says, so if Brad is almost always going to be working on new art for upcoming publications, then we can determine what is going to be coming up next, maybe?
Well, I have no problems with telling you what we're going to become, what's going to be coming up, and what I'm working on, as long as it has been announced. I have another job that I am starting work on, but I don't think it has been announced. So I'm afraid you're going to have to just hold your horses on that one, folks. Sorry.
He's scolding on me for telling on him. But
What's that?
He's scolding on me for telling on him.
But
Joan of Arc does ask, what is the best eraser an artist could have?
Oh, that actually is easy. This, at least this is what I like to use. Your standard, well, here, let's see if I can find it. Oh, here we go. I personally really like to use these Pentel polymer erasers. I think you can get them pretty much anywhere. I'm pretty sure we bought these from the art or office supply aisle at the local Walmart. They are pretty inexpensive. I think these three cost like $3 maybe, and they last forever. So, as a matter of fact, this is actually from last year because I'm still using the erasers that Jess bought me for stocking stuffers like 2 years ago. So yeah, they last forever. Hold on just a second, whatever. Anyhow. But almost anything other than those horrible pink erasers that teachers inflicted upon us when we were all in grade school, those tend to basically just rip the paper, and I cannot recommend them at all. There we go. Okay, there we go. Let's put you up back up on the wall here. And I think she is almost done other than the hair. Whoops, I still got to do the shading on her face though. So let's get that done real fast. And that will probably be enough to take us through the end of the show. Hold up, there we go. Nope, that ain't gonna work. Something happened with this particular size, and it does not like to draw very well anymore. And since the visible difference between a 0.03 and a 0.05 is almost non-existent. I think that's, yeah, no, excuse me, a 0.5. The nib of this is 0.5 millimeter in width. And if you're using it carefully, you can even do smaller than that. I think. Was I doing something? Just fell. I'm not sure what. Yeah, a couple of my other pens. No big deal. Just a second, guys. Like I said, my pens are revolting against me tonight. Of course, the pen that I needed to use was the pen that fell on the floor. Isn't that the way it always works? I think I'm going to do a little bit. Just while I'm thinking about it, I'm doing these last little bits on her staff just to make it pop. There we go. Okay. We have 3 minutes, folks. So any last comments, jokes?
Not as of this current moment.
Okay.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Zombie Folly redeemed a random Joker fact right in time.
Okay. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. Pound cake got its name because the original recipe required a pound each of butter, flour, sugar, and eggs. That's a lot of cake, but it was meant to last for a long time. And that's a 4-pound cake, folks. I don't know about you, but I'm getting indigestion just thinking about that. Also, because it probably sat in your stomach like it weighed 16 ounces each slice. So, doesn't that make you feel like you should have that little meme of the more you know?
Don't tempt me, I can put that in post edit.
What's that?
Don't tempt me, I can put it in post edit.
Wahaha. I would never tempt you to try to do anything like that. Wahaha.
So, Skunkworks does have a good point. How many eggs are in a pound?
That's a good question.
I'm gonna Google that.
Hmm?
I'm gonna go Google it real quick.
Yeah, really. Inquiring minds want to know about the weight of eggs. Probably also depends on what kind of egg what size egg. A jumbo egg is probably going to weigh a little bit more than a standard egg.
According to Google, eggs vary in weight since not all eggs are the same. Duh. Large eggs tend to weigh just short of 2 ounces apiece, so it takes between 8 to 9 large eggs to equal a pound.
There you go, folks. I'll bet you did not know when you tuned in tonight that you're going to find out such gripping culinary facts. I certainly didn't. Okay, it is 10 o'clock, and I think we are pretty much done for this week. As I have said before, thank you for tuning in. I will have plenty more to show you. I think we've got about 7 more sessions in this season. Hope to see all of you. And we shall be here next Monday, same bat time, same bat channel, and we are out.